Good day, my name is Mrs. Pinar. I am doing the exam-based presentation for 2019 DJP and DPP NM21. Your table of contents: the development of pre-primary numeracy, the development of learners' understanding of numbers, their symbols and values, how to develop learners' ability to identify features of objects and then classify them. Next bullet, how to develop learners' observation of patterns, sequence and ordinal numbers. Also, how to develop an understanding of spatial awareness, the 4 basic operations in mathematics and problem solving. We are also going to look at the measurement of time, length, mass and capacity, 2- and 3-dimensional shapes and data analysis. Then lastly, the teaching and learning activities and materials for pre-primary numeracy and mathematics. Alright, we're going to start with activities to understand mathematical concepts. Now, when we look at the word activities simply means what we are going to do as the teacher and as the learners. Things to do, activities, things to do. So we are going to look at the activities to make learners understand sequencing, classification, specifically color, shape and size, as well as counting. Now we will start with sequencing. Now how or what are the activities that we can do to make learners understand sequencing? Now what are sequencing? Sequencing is simply putting events, ideas or objects in a logical order. Now the activities, the practical activities that we can do, the first one there is picture sequencing. Now what do we mean by picture sequencing? My example that I have here is when the learner has to make himself a sandwich, for instance. The learner will take out the slices of bread and whatever he wants to put on this bread, maybe jam or whatever. Then he's going to take a knife and put on the jam, put the 2 slices together and then eat. Now this is what we mean by picture sequencing, meaning which picture will be first in the sequence. Another example is photo sequencing. Here I can ask my learner to bring pictures of himself as he has grown up, from a baby up to where he is now in pre-primary or in grade 1. So the learner will now put his own pictures or his own photos in chronological order, from baby up to where the age the child is now. That is photo sequencing, meaning to put something in a logical order. When it comes to letter and number sequencing, it's just the letters of the alphabet in a logical order, as well as numbers, as the child knows the numbers. For example, when it comes to sequencing in daily life, we will ask the child to give us examples of what he does during his day. From when the child gets up, the child will tell us he first takes a bath, then he brushes his teeth, then he puts on his school uniform, then he comes to school, etc., etc. This is how I can do practical activities to teach my child sequencing. Right? Then classification, when it comes to color, shape and size. Now, what is classification first? When I ask my learners to classify something, I expect them to classify things using color, size, shape, or kind. Now what I have here, I have counters of different colors. So when I need my child to classify objects in a specific color, I will ask the child to, for instance, take all the green colors and put them in a group. The yellow ones, the red ones, as well as my blue ones. So the child will now classify objects according to color. So now it's how I do practical activities with my child, sorting things or classifying objects according to color. Another example of how I can classify things or objects is according to size. Now here I have other objects which is also circular, like my counters. So what I will expect from my learners now is according to the size of my objects. These are all small circles, these are all bigger circles. So now my child has sort objects according to size. I can also continue and ask my learner to classify according to shape. So I will have different shapes now. I will have different shapes, and I will expect my learner to classify these objects according to their shapes. So I have squares, triangles, and circles. So the three ways how learners can classify objects: color, size, as well as shape. Right. So what I have on my screen, different activities: sorting objects, grouping of blocks using color, shape, or size, like we have done. I can also ask my learner to classify household items like fruits and vegetables. I can ask them to bring magazines, cut out pictures of fruits and vegetables, and now they have to put them in a table where they differentiate my fruits and my vegetables. They paste it on papers with fruits one side and vegetables the other side. Also, I can cut out pictures of things that, or I ask learners to cut out pictures of things that they like or things that they dislike. And also, on two different tables, they paste the pictures of things that they like and things that they do not like. Another example, practical example, in a grocery store, when I go to the grocery store, ask them when they go with their parents to a grocery store, they can classify meat, frozen fruits, as well as sweet things. These are all practical examples or activities that I do to classify or sort objects. Right, we'll talk about sequencing, classifying, and now comes to counting. When it comes to counting, I make use of my counters again. And for a learner at pre-primary or junior primary age, I give them a few counters. I give them a box, and the learner now has to take the counters one by one and count them. And at the end, the learner should tell the teacher how many objects. So they do it practically. 1, 2, 3, 4, and as they go about counting these objects, at the end they should tell the teacher how many objects. So they count the objects one by one. This is how we do counting. So after the learner has mastered the counting skill, I will now expect the learner to know the number of objects. So now I will use a worksheet like the example that I have here, the worksheet, and I will just expect the learners to the number of objects, to link it to the number that he has. For example, there I have one object, and that is 1, 2, 3, and there is also 3, supposed to be 4. Okay, there's another dog, for example. So 4. And this is what I expect from my learners after they have mastered the skill of counting. In my class, as a pre-primary or primary teacher, these are some of the things that I am expected to have on my walls. Number charts, flashcards of numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. So as a pre-primary and junior primary teacher, I'm expected to always have my things practical. That when it comes to counting. Right, we'll move on. This is just an example of a worksheet for classifying. The learner can just circle around specific animals. Yeah, I have some horses, cats, dogs, and so forth. Those are just examples of worksheets. Right, when it comes to measuring of length, mass, capacity, and time, how do we go about? In the process of measuring, in preschool, meaning in pre-primary or junior primary phases, we do not expect learners to measure with measuring instruments. So they do not use rulers or measuring tape or scales or whatsoever in these phases. So we use non-standard measuring units and no instruments. So what do we use then? Right, how to teach the concept of length. Learners start by using non-standard objects to measure, like they use their feet or their hands. So the learner use, like for example, I use my hand, or I can use say for instance, I have this length, so I can use my pen to measure and see this length is my pen plus 3/4 of my pen. So the learners will say this is 2 parts or 2 times the length of my pen. If I look at this worksheet here, the teacher asks the learners to count the number of blocks the length of this pencil is. And then the learner should write in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks is the length of the pencil. Same here. Blocks are used, and then the learner write in the number of blocks the length of the objects are. Here we use some paper clips to measure the length of the learner's hand. So any non-standard object we can use. Like I have here the heel to toe. So the learner walk next to the wall of the classroom, and then the learner counts how many feet it takes to the length of the wall of the classroom. So then he will write in the heel to toe method. So these are some of the worksheets that they can use. When it comes to the concept of mass, again, like I said, no scales, to be used. And in this case, the learner just used the vocabulary heavy and light. So we'll just talk about how heavy an object is or how light an object is. And here learners compare the mass through pushing or pulling. For instance, you can ask them to push the teacher's table and to push their own desk. Now the learner will compare the mass through how heavy the table of the teacher is when he pushed or when he pulled the teacher's table, and when he pushed his own desk. So which one is heavier and which one is lighter? And they can also compare mass by hefting. Now hefting simply means when I take two objects, I put a lighter object in my one hand and a heavier object on my other hand, and then here I compare light and heavy. So I just do compare mass with the fact that I do pulling, pushing, or hefting. Right, when it comes to the concept of time, here, please teachers, we do not make use of clocks, not at this stage of the learner's age. Here, we make use of long and short periods of time. For instance, a day or a week. The child knows how long he stays at school, and the days that he comes to school is maybe a week long or 5 days. So here we talk about long and short periods of time. When it comes to time of the day, here we just simply talk about morning, afternoon, and evening. So these are the concepts that they should grasp, that they should understand. Days of the week, in our classroom, we should have a calendar, like the example that I have here, a calendar with the days of the week, so that the learners knows the days of the week. And as a teacher, it is expected from me to tell the learners which day it is every day when they enter my class. So they should know the days of the week. Months of the year, I should have a calendar in my class with the months of the year so that learners can follow the months of the year. And it will be nice if I have a calendar in my class of birthdays, the month of the birthdays of specific learners, so that they can understand and know it's going to take a while for my birthday to be, or my birthday will be next month. So all these things is compulsory in a pre-primary class, junior primary class. So yeah, the activities to help learners grasp the concept of time. Like I already said, we create calendars. We use timely words. Tomorrow, today, yesterday. We can read books to them about time. And we can also make a countdown chain, like in the example here, where, say for instance, when is our next holiday, school holiday. So now I make a chain of the number of days, and as the days go by, I just get rid of one of the links of the chain. So by the end, now the learners, the shorter the chain becomes, the closer it becomes to the holiday. Those are just examples. Right. How to develop learners' understanding of numbers, their symbols, and values. Right. When it comes to counting. First of all, we have two different kinds of counting: rote counting and rational counting. Now the first one, rote counting, is simply developed first, whereby learners recite the number names. So rote counting is developed first in any child. We know that many of our children, as they grow up, they start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 maybe, but the child still do not have a concept of how many 10 is, how many 5 is. It is just simply reciting the numbers. When it comes to rational counting, This is now a higher level of counting, where the learners now have a one-to-one correspondence, meaning like when I showed you counting, he knows this is one counter, two counters, like the example there, 5. So that is one-to-one correspondence, that is rational counting. Now, what are the advantages of counting? We can have advantages on national level, local level, and personal level. On national level, why should we know how to count on national level? Simply, when we do census. Why do we do census? In order to make provision for services in our population. The government needs to know how many people there are in a country, so that they know when to when to build some hospitals or schools. So it is on national level, it is compulsory for us to know how many people there are in a country to make use, so that we can make provision for services like hospitals and schools. Why is it compulsory for us to know how to count on local level? Measuring and calculating human traffic and motor vehicle traffic by municipalities, so that municipalities know when to build more roads or put up some robots or whatever. So on local level for municipalities, it is important for us to know how to count. And what are the advantages of counting on a personal level? Simply for me to communicate. I need to tell people what my telephone number is. I need to tell people my address. I need to tell people how old I am. So to communicate, to solve problems, for instance, when I go to the shop, I need to know these are the prices of things, so I can calculate how much money is needed for specific items. Those are the reasons or the advantages of counting. Teaching concepts like doubling or halving. Now, it is very important for us to do doubling and halving practically. Again, I use my counters. Let's explain doubling first. I use my counters. Say, for instance, as a teacher, I have a group of counters. I will immediately ask my learner to put the same number of counters. So the learner should take the same number of counters and make a group of the same number. So immediately I have done doubling, because I have put the same number of counters in two different groups. So if this is my group, that is another group. So the same number 2 times is doubling. So as a teacher, I do it practically. I put a number of counters and I ask my learner to put the same number of counters. Then we add, or we count the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So double 3 equals to 6. 3 times 2 equals to 6. I do doubling and I do it practically. When I do halving, first of all, in this age group, pre-primary and junior primary, we work with even numbers. They do not use fractions yet, so I cannot take 1 and divide it, because at this age they do not work with fractions. So I take even numbers, say for instance 4. So I'm going to halve. So this 4 counters, my learner should now divide into 2 equal groups. So what is my learner going to do? Into two equal groups. So halving simply means to take the same number and divide it into two equal groups. So now I have two groups, and each group contains 1, 2, 1, 2 counters. So I should do these practically, and remember, when it comes to halving, we only use even numbers. Right. What are the different learning styles? Meaning, in my class, I sit with individuals. I sit with learners that learns or understands differently. The first learning style is visual. Learners learn by seeing. So, how do these learners learn? They learn by images. They like to see pictures. They like to see maps. They like to see things. They like pictures. These learners can also visualize objects. They have a good spatial sense. These learners also love drawing. And these learners, at the end of the day, have a good sense of color balance, and they have a good sense of dress. So my learner that learns visually are the learners that prefers to learn by seeing. Then my other learning style, auditory. Auditory meaning to hear. So these learners like to learn by hearing. So learners will learn. The learner depends on hearing and speaking. So these learners are the ones that will sit near to the teacher, because they need to hear the teacher clearly, and they are also the learners that will speak more. They are the ones that will ask the questions, because they learn through hearing and speaking. Then we also have our tactile learners, and these learners learn by touching. These are the learners that want to touch. They are the ones that will always do things. They are the ones that will play with clay. They are the ones that want to experience things. In my, say for instance, in my biology class or in my science class, these are the learners that would like to do experiments. So these learners learn through doing things, and they like to experience the world and act out events. So they are the ones that would like to learn through drama. Maybe I can do some drama in my class to try to grasp the attention of this learner. But if I just write on the board, or if I just talk as a learner, these are the learners that will get bored very easily. Those are the three learning styles. Right, when it comes to visual discrimination, what is visual discrimination? It is the ability to see differences and similarities between objects around us, to understand and interpret the world around us better. So, the people that see the differences and similarities. Just for instance, if I take this here, for instance, the differences around us is they have 3 different colors, but the similarities are they are all circle shaped. So visual discrimination, if we can see the differences as well as the similarities between objects around us. Right, the roles of visual discrimination. Learners must be able to distinguish between different letters in order to read and write words. So learners must be able to distinguish between different letters in order to read and write words. Distinguish between a B and a D, B and D. for them to be able to read. Learners must be able to distinguish between different numbers, symbols, and names. Right. How will I identify a learner that have difficulty with visual discrimination? These are the learners that are not able to dress themselves. So there are different ages for learners to do different things, or for children. So if I see at a certain age my child is not able to dress himself, then I know there might be a possibility that my child have a difficulty with visual discrimination. Another example is they cannot distinguish between similarities and differences in formation of letters. Again, the D and the B sounds. And then they also are not able to distinguish between the size of letters or objects. Right. When it comes to form constancy, what is form constancy? It is the ability that allows you to understand that a shape or object stays the same even if you view it from a different direction or in a different environment. Just a simple example. Say for instance I have a triangle in my class. I will ask my learner, when you go home this afternoon, go write down all the signs that are triangular shape that you come across as you go home. So now tomorrow the child will come back and tell me the signs that he have come across, the road signs that you have come across that is triangular shape or is circular shape, so that my child knows that the circle in class is the same circle that is in the environment, or the plate at home that he eats out of is the same circular shape as the circle that we have in the class. So what can I ask my learner to do? Like I just said, an example that I have given. Other examples are cut out shapes and group them so that the learner can arrange them from small to big, so that they know the shape stays the same, although the size might differ. I can also ask my learner to point out objects in class that looks like a certain shape. And then I can make use of worksheets. There are examples of the worksheets. The child has to identify or circle the matching shape on each line. So the child needs to find the exact shape in the worksheet. What are ordinal and cardinal numbers? First, an ordinal number is the number that tells position. When we have athletics, they run, so the one that is the winner came first, then second, then third. So these are ordinal numbers. Ordinal numbers are numbers that tells position. And cardinal numbers are the numbers that we know. 1, 2, 3, 5, 15. That is used in simple counting, and that indicates how many objects or elements there are. Cardinal number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ordinal numbers shows position, first, second, and third. Right, spatial awareness. Spatial awareness is the ability to understand and interact with the environment around us. Spatial awareness is the ability to understand and interact with the environment around us. Now, how do I identify a learner that has poor spatial awareness? The characteristics of learners with poor spatial awareness are they are usually clumsy. It means they bump into things. They are clumsy. They bump into objects against the table. against chairs and things. So those are characteristics of a learners with poor spatial awareness. There are also the learners that is mostly unable to tell left from right. They have difficulty doing physical activities like to jump or to catch a ball. They are also the ones that have difficulty copying patterns and shapes from the board. And they're also the ones that usually have problems interpreting instructions. Like you tell the child, go to the door, go fetch the ball, go throw in the bin. Those are some of the characteristics of learners with poor spatial awareness. Now, how do I expand the learners' vocabulary with the ones that have problems with poor spatial concepts? I play games, and as I can see from my worksheet here, I can ask them to go low, I can ask them to go high. So those are vocabulary that I use. I put the low in the middle, meaning it's medium high, run straight, run curve, run zigzag, come close, go far, open your hands, go tight. So those are the games that I can play to help my learner with the vocabulary in spatial awareness. That I give oral directions, like I just said. Go left, go right. Place toys in position. I tell my child, go fetch the doll that is on the bed or under the bed. So I place toys in position. Build and learn. I have classroom labels like door, chair, table. Partner play, like they chase each other and the one stand behind the other one, in front of. That is partner play. I do over and under dance over the chair, under my arm. I sing some songs like Father Abram have many sons, left arm, right arm, all those kind of things. And I do obstacle course where they have to climb over obstacles. When it comes to reading and writing numbers in words and in numerals, the example I have here, first it is in numerals and you are asked to write the numeral into words. So it's 1,956,258. Then I have in words, and I am asked to put it in numerals or in numbers, 6,269,008. When it comes to data handling, usually you will be given a graph. In my first example, we have a telechart. The telechart shows us, and in a telechart, just want to show 2, 3, 4, and then I draw a line through, which is 5. So in this sports here, basketball, the number of students that plays basketball is 6. Now, you will always have a graph, and from the graph, you have to determine the answers of a question. But also remember, they always have a key as well. So in this case, it shows that one of these pictures of a cupcake is equal to 6 cupcakes. So if you are asked, how many cupcakes did they bake on a Monday? All you do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each one represents 6 cupcakes. So it's 5 times 6, which will give me 30 cupcakes that was baked on a Monday. In this case, I have apple, orange, banana, and then they can ask me how many more apples did the learners eat on Monday than oranges, or how many apples did they eat more than oranges. I have 35 apples and 30 oranges, so I subtract the difference between the number of those two. So I must always be aware of my information on my graph. When it comes to 2D and 3D shapes, when it comes to shapes, let's talk about 2D shapes first. 2D shapes are shapes that only have length and height or width. They only have 2 dimensions. Let's take a triangle. Triangle, why is it called a triangle? I must also be aware of the properties of shapes. Why is it called a triangle? Because it has 1, 2, 3 sides. Triangle is called a triangle because of its 3 sides. Why do I call a shape a square? The properties of a square, it has 4 sides and it has angles that are 90 degrees. So let's look at the square and the rhombus, for instance. Both the square and the rhombus have 4 sides that are all equal, but the difference between the square and the rhombus are the angles of those shapes. So I have to know all the properties of my shapes. Why is the hexagon? Because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. So I should know the properties of my shapes. Same with 3D shapes. What are 3D shapes? 3D shapes are shapes that have 3 dimensions: length, height, and width. And 3D shapes have volume. I brought along a box. You can take it to your any box to your class and explain. The box that I have here is an example of a rectangular prism. So from here, I can tell my child, look at the number of faces. So the child count the number of faces, because when I have to write the properties of shapes, I need to know the number of faces. I also need to know the number of edges. An edge is where 2 faces meet. The number of edges, here on the shapes here, the number of edges. These are my faces. My edges are the ones where the 2 faces meet. And then I should also be aware of my vertices. One vertex is now where the edges meet, and many vertices. On my picture here, where the edges meet, we usually call it the corner. I call it your vertex or your vertices. So I should be aware of the number of faces of my 3D shapes, as well as the number of edges and vertices. When it comes to Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom's taxonomy is simply the levels of difficulty. Now, Bloom's taxonomy, and then the level of difficulty has to do with the verb that I use when I ask a specific question. When it comes to basic knowledge, these are the words define, describe, outline. When it comes to a higher level, according to Bloom, then these are the verbs that I will use: apply, demonstrate, solve. And the third level, the very high level of understanding: evaluate, appraise, compare, judge, discuss, critically, criticize. So I have to know the different verbs in order for me to know the levels of difficulty according to Bloom's taxonomy. Right, how will I help a child to develop his hand-eye coordination? So the activities that I will use to assist the child in developing his hand-eye coordination are simply coloring. I'll give them pictures to color in, trace on the dotted line, give the child a scissor and lots of work to cut out, catch a ball or kick a ball, skipping with a rope, working with clay, and string beads, small beads in a string, put it together. Those are activities that I can assist my child with hand-eye coordination. Right, almost at the end of our presentation. To calculate time, my example here is 4 hours and 25 minutes plus 1 hour and 55 minutes. How do I go about? I first add my hours. 4 hours plus 1 hour. So I group my hours together and I group my minutes together. So I have 4 plus 1 hour, which will give me 5 hours. 25 plus 55 minutes gives me 80 minutes. Right, what do I see? I see that 80 minutes is more than 1 hour because there are 60 minutes in an hour. So I subtract the 60 minutes, which will give me 20 minutes. So this 60 minutes is most an hour. So I have 5 hours plus this 1 hour, which will give me now 6 hours, 20 minutes. What do? I group my hours and I group my minutes. My other example that I have is 5 days, 10 hours minus 3 days, 20 hours. 5 days, 10 hours minus 3 days, 20 hours. What do? I again put them in different units. So I have 5 days minus 3 days, and then I have 10 hours minus 20 hours. Right. 5 days minus 3 days will give me 2 days. 10 hours minus 20 hours. What do I do when I usually have a smaller number? I go borrow. Now where do I go borrow from? I go borrow from my days. So what do I have left? I have 1 day left. So 1 day is equal to 24 hours. So what do I have now? I have 10 hours plus 24 hours, right? Which is equal to 34 hours minus my 20 hours. What did I do? I went to borrow from my days. So what do I, at the end, I have 1 day and 14 hours. Quickly, I separate my days from my hours. The 10 hours is less than the 20 hours. So I borrowed from my days, gives me 1 day left. The 1 day is equal to 24 hours. I add my 24 hours, which gives me 34 hours minus 10 hours. At the end, my answer is 1 day and 14 hours. We have come to the end. So all I want to wish you good luck with your exams. Please be mindful of the time as you are writing the examination. Spend at least 2 minutes per mark. These are just some tips that I'm giving you. Don't waste time with questions that you do not know. Go to the ones that you are comfortable with and then later return to the ones that you did not know. Please prepare well in advance for the examination and don't wait till the last minutes to study. If you are not ready, you will become nervous during the examination, and this could lead to failure. Write as neatly as you can. I thank you.